Hi, I'm Vic, and I'm going to be talking about change in a DevOps world. And when I say change, this could be a feature that somebody builds, or a backend improvement that you're doing to your code to make the performance better, or you had a lot of old tech debt that you want to get rid of as a developer. So change could be anything that goes out to a customer. But before we get into the talk, I have a small warning. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos yesterday on how to give presentations, and one of the things that kept coming up was making a lot of eye contact with people, especially for 3 seconds. So if you find me staring at any one of you, I'm just trying to give the talk and count till 3, so don't mind that. So yeah, cool. Now, a quick show of hands, how many of you know what is butterfly effect? Okay, that's good. And I'm not talking about this movie that came out in 2004. Even though if you've not seen it, it's a good movie, I highly recommend it. It used to be like, I think, the Interstellar or the Inception of the early 2000s. But if you watch it now, the acting will seem like a bit overboard, but it's still a good idea. They do time travel, they talk about complicated things. But the kind of butterfly effect that I was talking about was this one, where you say that a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and that causes a hurricane in Texas. But obviously butterflies don't do that, otherwise there would be too much chaos everywhere. But what this is really talking about is that you're part of a big complex ecosystem and you make a small change somewhere in a corner and you have catastrophic effects on the other side, which you don't even know about. So how does this relate to a DevOps world? Say you are an intern at Facebook, you've just joined, you deploy a change and you bring down Facebook per an hour. And this is not a made up story. Things like these have happened in the past. There are changes that, and I'm not saying it's just interns who have done this, there are other people. I just use this example as an intern, and this has happened at companies like Amazon, Atlassian, Facebook, where somebody does something, somebody releases a change and things just crash, or you did not test it well enough, or you were not anticipating, say, a use case from a customer, especially when you're trying to deploy and make changes 3 to 4 times a day, or in some cases every few minutes. I think if you read online, companies like Amazon do deployment. They say they want to do deployments every few minutes because of the kind of change that goes out, because of the kind of features that get listed, the kind of product. So it's a very fast-paced and very constantly changing kind of environment. So with the DevOps world, you get that flexibility that you're able to ship things very fast, you're able to release a lot of change, but it also brings a lot of risk because you could make mistakes because you're trying to ship things very fast. But overall, if you look at the benefits that you get from working in a DevOps environment far outweigh the risk or the other efforts that you gain from it. Now, before we get into a talk, I'll introduce myself a little bit. So before working, I've been working at Atlassian. Actually, today I finished my 7 years. So I've been here for about 7 years now. And before this, I used to work as a DevOps engineer. And I've worked in some product companies in India and in UK. And the last role that I did was at a company that makes software for online betting sites. So things like Bet365 or Sportsbet. There's just 1 or 2 major companies that make that software, and they have sort of the monopoly. And the way their software is set up or functioned is that 70% of the backend software is same for most of these betting sites, and the remaining 30% gets customized. So they work with different clients and they customize the software that goes out. And I used to manage releases for one of the clients. So as I was finishing my probation, like the 3-month mark, my manager got me in for a meeting, and we used to do releases, not in the DevOps way where you do multiple releases a day or at least once a day. We used to only get a monthly release that we could do. And his recommendation or his clear instructions to me were that you get the last Friday of the month to do a release, and if you screw up, don't come back on the Monday. That's how, that was the kind of financial implication there were if things went wrong. Because there was a lot of money, and it's not very uncommon to have that kind of pressure in the role because there are a lot of downstream implications. Like if you work in healthcare, if you work in a bank, or say if you work for a company that makes trading software, these sort of expectations are there. That's why they're slow to adopt to change. They don't ship a lot, they ship very slowly, they're more cautious because they have to pay a lot of money out to people if things don't go to plan. And they especially have a lot of big enterprise customers that they're trying to work with. So it was apart from the release part of it, the role was quite relaxed. Things would work quite well. It was very similar to how things work at Atlassian, but there was that additional stress of managing releases for big customers, the financial implications, the other sides of it. So I did that for about an hour, and then I took a 2-year break to get rid of the stress that I had. And then I moved to Australia. I've been at Atlassian for about 7 years now, where I work as a product lead for our migrations team, which is the team that helps customers go from Atlassian's on-prem offerings, like data center or server offerings, to the cloud offerings. So that's the sort of work I do. And In the time that I've been here, I've also conducted about 300 to 400 interviews. So I like interviewing people, I do a lot of that. So in my free time when I'm not working, I help people land their dream jobs, I help them with their resumes, I help them polish their LinkedIn profile. So that's a side business or a side gig that I run along with my day-to-day work. Okay, that's a lot about me. I think, I actually spoke a bit more than what I was intending to. So let's move on now. So does anybody know what this symbol is or what that? Infinity, yes. So the reason why I think the infinity symbol was chosen to resemble DevOps is to show that it's not like a point in time thing where you build something, you release something, and then you forget about it. It's to show that there's a continuous loop, that there are things that are going on where you build something, you give it out to customers, you hear back from them on what is happening, and then you keep iterating on what is going out. And I'll quickly go through each of the phases that this talks about. And not all companies will have all 8 phases, or some of them may have some additional phases depending on what they're talking about or how they implement things, depending on whether or not they have a big test team and how they run their operations, what kind of automation they have. So you start off in the discovery phase, which is probably what somebody like Jens would have been at the start of the year, where he's trying to define what the problem is, what he's trying to solve for his customer, what is the gap that he's trying to see in the market with release notes not being there or not solving the actual use case that he thinks the customer really wants to care about. Once he's done the discovery, or once, like say in a small startup, they figured out what product or what tool they're trying to build, you go into your planning phase. This is where once you narrow down an idea, you still have a lot of things to do. You need to build the UI, you need to do your backend stuff. You have a long list in your backlog, and with limited resources, you can't really do everything. So you try and pick and choose what you want to work on. You try and figure out the kind of features that you think will deliver most value or will probably take your customers to go from free customers to paid customers or will help you with conversion. So you try and optimize for the goals that you have. Once you narrow down the kind of things you want to build, or a PM would come and tell you what things you need to build, then you sort of start building. So building is where a lot of your coding will come in, where you will integrate with your existing software, where you think about the functionality that is needed, where you start building things. And a lot of companies are now moving towards, especially SaaS companies are moving towards a model where they don't have a QA team. So you won't really have the luxury of building something and then pass it on to a test team who will do the testing for you. I think Spotify is probably an exception to that norm, but all other companies, even companies like Atlassian, Google, Facebook, none of them really have QA teams. Devs do their own testing, or they do a thing called dog fooding, where say if Atlassian is shipping out a new feature in Jira, we'll roll it out to everybody within the company. Like there are 10,000 people working here, so you get a lot of feedback internally before you release it out to customers. So that's the sort of testing they do, but it's not really dedicated test teams who are trying to use and give you feedback. Once you're done with your testing and you're happy with it, and as a developer or as a PM, you will never be 100% happy with what you've shipped. There will always be things that you can make perfect, but you usually go with like 80 or 90% good enough. So because you want to put something out in front of customers sooner rather than later, because you may spend years building something and then realize that it's not actually solving the problem that you thought about, which is where your deployment cycle comes in, which is where a lot of SREs, a lot of people who maintain your systems, who maintain your servers, they start helping you out. They help you understand how to take things out to the market, how to deploy, how to ship your releases, how to ship your features going out. Once the features have been shipped, that doesn't always mean that your customers start seeing it. There are ways on how some features are shown to some subset of customers and not to everyone, but we'll get to that later in the presentation. And then after your features have gone out, they have been deployed, they're operating well, they're functioning well, you look at the logs, you look at different monitoring systems that you have, you try to get feedback from customers, maybe you put out community posts or you put out blogs, and you see how your customers are responding to it. That's when you understand whether what you built is actually doing the job it was meant to do, whether it's actually solving the customer problem or giving them some value or delivering what you thought they were going to do. And that sort of feeds back into what goes back into your discovery. So you then start wondering what problems you need to solve first, or what problems you need to solve again, or maybe change the way you thought about solving them. And that loop continues till you get to a good product market fit where you know where the software or the feature that you're shipping out is what your customers need, but the loop, like the situation doesn't end it, you keep on going in that loop. But the main benefit you get is you don't have to wait months or years to ship something out. You ship iteratively, you get feedback, and then you keep moving on. Now let's look at some, and because I work at Atlassian, I'm sort of biased towards showing their tools here because I'm more familiar with them. But by no means this is a list of all the software. This is not an exhaustive list. There are other tools in the market that do this, but for like Atlassian seems to have a good footprint, a good market share in all of the DevOps phases. They help people discover with Jira Product Discovery. You have Jira software to plan how you're going to do things. You have Confluence and Trello. You have Bitbucket, and then other competitor to Bitbucket would be something like GitHub. Atlassian doesn't really have something to help with testing. So Selenium is a good one where you can emulate how end users do your testing, how they try to replicate what is happening. Then you have Bitbucket where you have pipelines, or you have Jenkins, you have other tools in the market. There's Ops Genie. So there's a whole heap of things that are there. This is just to give you an idea of how or where Atlassian sits and where other products also sit in this area. Now that we know about all of this, sorry, I clicked that by mistake. So yeah, now that we know about all of this, I'll just quickly walk you through how releases or how changes happen at Atlassian. And quick show of hands, is there anybody here who has never gotten on an airplane, who's never taken a flight? No? Okay, good. It would have served as a learning exercise for people who've never taken a flight, because I've used the analogy of like the release cycle to an aeroplane and how things work. So when you start your journey, like you're a traveler, you decide to go somewhere. So your piece of code or that idea or the thing that you're trying to build is the original intent that somebody has an idea, somebody wants to go from point A to point B. That's how you're a traveler, or that's a traveler in the analogy. So your piece of code is your traveler there. Then you're still not sure if it's going to go out, but the moment you start merging your code with the other code that's out there, or where you figure out how your code is going to go out, that's when you really commit to it. You buy a ticket. So now it's sort of optional. You can still cancel things, you can still back out, but you know you're on the journey now. At that point, now you're happy, you're confident with how your code is looking, you checked your own things. Now you start merging things into the other branches that are there. You merge into the master branch, so you know that your code is not just there in isolation, you're there as a team, you're there with a lot of people, and now you're trying to see what kind of effect it is having with other people's code when things are starting to merge in. After your check-in, your boarding gate opens, and at this point you're really ready to go. You're all set, you want to go in, but you still have time to back out. It's not like you can't get off the plane. So you still make last minute changes, you still think about things. There are cutoff times, there are timelines that you're trying to work towards. But once you board the plane, once your artifact is built out, once it's ready to go in, it's usually not too easy to back out. Not to say that you can't back out, there are things that can happen, but now you're all set and ready to go. Before you start, like you are ready to go, you're in the flight, but there are a lot of other people, there are a lot of other changes that are going to go in with you. And at that point, you have your flight attendants, you have your SREs, you have other people trying to do some last minute checks, trying to do some go/no-go decisions to see whether you're really set to go out or not, along with the other things that are going out. Once you take off, that's when your code is officially deployed. You're in the air. Now, hopefully, you'll get to point B. Most flights get to the destination unless something bad really happens. Sorry for the bad humor. And then, once you're in the air, once you're in cruise mode, that's when other people start coming in. That's when your SREs come in. They start helping you out, or you start deciding how to enable this to all your customers, how features go out. So, and a lot of companies, not just Atlassian, a lot of companies follow similar models. Some steps may change here and there. They may have automation, so they may not really have 7 or 8 phases, or some may have an extended phase, but usually this is what the life cycle of a feature or a change looks like. Now, in today's age, like we have SaaS softwares, like when you go to Gmail, you don't really care about when the releases are happening. So there's an underlying assumption or an underlying change mantra that you want to work towards, that your end users don't really care about how change is happening. They only care about getting new features, but they don't want to be bothered about doing upgrades or managing things. So that's one of the guiding principles that a lot of companies, that a lot of SaaS softwares work with. Let's look at a case study from Facebook to understand this deeper. At any given time when you use Facebook, even in your app or on the browser, there are at least a few hundred versions of Facebook running at any given time. So 2 people sitting next to each other might be using Facebook, but that doesn't mean they're seeing the exact same features in Facebook. Some may be seeing a different logo, some may be seeing a different icon in the marketplace, or a different kind of ad material that goes out. So what a lot of these companies, or what Facebook does in this case, is they know a lot of demographic information about your end users. They know where you're from, they know what school you went to, what your age group is, where you come from, what your hobbies are. So they put you in cohorts, and then they try to experiment. It's more like an A/B test that marketing people would do, where they would show different ads to people to see what was happening, to see what kind of response that is coming. And in a company like Facebook, what they would do is They roll out a feature, they test it out with some small groups, and then they may decide that the future is worth the investment. They may invest more resources and build it out as a full-fledged feature, or they may completely discard it. So there's a lot of experimentation that they do before they get a good product market fit. So there's a lot of change, and a lot of companies do this. It's not just Facebook. Like if you open your Spotify app, you see a lot of things that other people may not be seeing because they're trying to market, or a lot of promotions that you see in apps. Like if you go to sites like Udemy or Groupon, they show different vouchers to different people, depending on different promotions that they're trying to run or different experiments that they're trying to work towards. So that's about how Facebook does it. And I'll also talk a bit about how Atlassian does that. So like we spoke a lot about how code gets written, how it gets shipped. So the code and deployment piece, I've already covered all of that. But similarly, Atlassian uses a tool called Launch Darkly. So your customers are again put into different groups or different cohorts. A feature will get deployed, and then using Launch Darkly, which has some rules on how you evaluate or how you pick customers, a product manager will slowly go ahead and start enabling the rollout for say 2 or 3% of all customers, try to get some feedback. And it won't be similar to the Facebook example where they will completely discard the feature. The goal here is to get feedback to make sure there are no big bugs or improvements that need to happen. They get all of that feedback, and then they start gradually opening it up to 100% of customers. And they may take a day or two to do it. They may take 10 days to do it. In some cases, they may stop at a certain percentage if things are not going to plan, if they decide to roll back. But that's how so a new feature that comes out doesn't really go out to all Atlassian customers at the same time. They cherry pick, and PMs decide or product managers decide how these things are going to go out. Cool. Thank you.